Welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh my gosh. The good news is Mercury went direct, but things are still crazy. So we're really happy that you're here with us, either watching as we're doing this live or on the replay, as Eric and I talk about the constellations of the Ram and the Bull. And this is so amazing. Like my mind has been blown, crazy blown with what we've been looking at. And I think the same is true for you too, Eric, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of new information, and as we dive deep into these constellations along the ecliptic, a lot of new information comes out and really opens up territory for even more research.
Yes, like for sure. So let's
Hmm.
just bring ourselves present and to connect in with the um, what this is a Carl Sagan quote that will just maybe help to bring us into this place of appreciation for what it is that we're looking at. So he says, our lives, our past, and our future are tied to the sun, the moon, and the stars. We humans have seen the atoms constituting all of nature and the forces that sculpted this work. And we who embody the local eyes and ears and thoughts and feelings of the cosmos have begun at least to wonder about our origins. Star stuff, contemplating the stars, organized collections of 10 billion atoms, contemplating the evolution of nature, tracing that long path where it arrived as consciousness here on planet Earth. We speak for the Earth. Our obligation to survive and flourish is owed not just to ourselves, but also to that cosmos, ancient and vast, from where we spring. We are one species. We are star stuff, harvesting starlight.
Mm.
Love that.
Yeah, Carl Sagan, you are definitely missed.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Uh, so just to kind of these are the two constellations that we're going to be looking at. We've got the beginning of the Ram over here, and the beginning of the Bull over here, and the beginning of the Twins over here. And basically, currently, the sun is in the Ram from about April 19th to May 13th, and almost about a month. And it's actually a smaller constellation, and it's just how they divide it up. And this is based on what the astronomers are saying is when it's in this constellation. And then and so it could be that it's a little bit different story in terms of how we're looking at it. Uh, and then the bull, it's in the sun is in this constellation from about May 14th until June 21st when it reaches the galactic cross. And we'll look at that a little bit more. But the sun is also with the Pleiades around May 2021. And so that we can say that, the bull constellation starts a little bit before the Pleiades. I didn't get that line in there exactly right, but that kind of thing. So that gives us a sense of why these constellations or how these constellations are not exactly the same as the signs, because the seasons are somewhat different. And that we also are looking at the Ram, which is number 8 according to Ptolemy, and the Bull number 9 according to Ptolemy, in his listing of the 48 constellations. So I think with that, we're ready to start looking at the Ram.
Yeah, thank you, Kaylin. So yeah, we're doing the Ram and the Bull in this class, and these particular constellations in relatively recent human history, really figured very prominently in the our ages. We're currently quote in the age of the fish, but we had left the age of the Ram before right at the very beginning of the Christianity when that came about. So what we're seeing here is the Ram constellation right there in the center, and there's basically really four primary stars. Usually, most people only see three of them, like the three that make up the sort of the horns and the head, Hamal, Sheraton, and Mesothym, and then Bahrani is that last prominent star. But the astronomers consider a lot of stars below those four primary stars to be part of the constellation of the Ram, but they're really faint stars, but under better conditions outside cities and suburbs, you can see those stars. But really, that particular like formation stands out really well. So this, everybody's going to get the slides to this, so you can see. And what those orangish, reddish lines, they divide the signs. So you can see Aries basically mostly into the fish. It's like just at the edge between Aries and Taurus. In fact, that's sliding more and more toward Taurus. What year did you say that Alrisha will be in Taurus, Kaylin?
I want to say 2040, but I'd have to go back and look to be sure.
Okay, so that's coming up soon, and that's
Yeah.
definitely I would say another like powerful marker for celestial calendar. And then it goes all the way, the sign of Taurus, which is contains the entirety of the Ram constellation, goes all the way until we get to the Pleiades, which is what Caitlin just talked about there, and then kind of divides the constellation Perseus, and shows that in there. It's something we talked a bit about when we talked about the Bohemian stars in the last series, and Algol in particular, which is in at the ending of the last few degrees of Taurus. So we can go on to the next slide. So here's just a basic graphic, another way to look at this visually without all the constellation lines and everything. So you can see the signs, which are the symbols right there, and then outlining the colored lines, the fish's primary stars and the Ram's primary stars. So you can see sort of the like approximately the area of the sign that they take up. And then I've also marked the June solstice point and the March equinox point for sort of an FYI, kind of help you navigate through that. And so the Ram extends roughly from about 2 degrees to 20 degrees in the sign of Taurus. Again, that's an approximation. When we're dealing with constellations, it's not about precise lines, because there's overlap, there is space between constellations that were like intentionally looked at as these unformed stars, these areas where there's a lot of creative energy, and it doesn't belong to really any story, but they're there just to, for imagination, for creative purposes, for alchemy, and so forth. So the Ram is one of the smallest constellations in the sky, and I can't remember how many. There's not too many that are smaller than this.
Maybe the crab. I think they think the crab is the smallest one, and I
Okay,
think the ram is maybe right behind that, but they're both really small.
right. Okay. So this is a marked March equinox, roughly about 1700 BCE, although one could say 1800, all the way until about 300 BCE to maybe even, depending on what measurements you're using, you could also say 200 BCE. It's a really small constellation, so it doesn't mean that that's like exactly the years of the age of the Ram, where the March equinox point was. So again, one is using whatever measurements we're using, and you read books, go online, and there may be different years used. I use what I did to work with this is basically using stellarium, and you can go back in time to see how the March equinox point slides back and forth depending on what years you're going to determine when that equinox point is in the years. So prior to the image of the Ram, it was actually the constellation was seen as a hireling or a plow, or like an indentured servant, representing an older constellation with the land for humanity. So it really had a much closer relationship with the Earth. And it does kind of look like more of a plow. I've got another slide later that shows that. But it also was a story that was woven in was Jason the Argonauts and the search for the Golden Fleece. which is a story that represents the turning of the age from the bull to the ram at vernal equinox. So I've got slides for various stories and so forth here. So here's a quote from the Bible, from Isaac, that's related to the ram constellation. So it says, then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered up for a burnt offering instead of his son. And that is essentially like this transition, even from the age of the ram to the age of the fish. This particular constellation figures really heavily in the origins of Christianity, especially through Judaism. And the act of sacrifice, as it relates to the lamb or goat, is associated with this constellation, especially as the lamb or goat bearing the sins of the community or the tribe. There's even even the goatfish, has some connections here too. Here's another quote: "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." And what's interesting on I-5, and I think it's I can't remember if it's in Washington State, I believe. There's a off to the side. There's like a cemetery, and it shows a statue of Jesus with his flock of sheep. And I look at that, and all I can think of is the cosmology. All I can think of is like the age of the ram shifting to the age of the fish, but like he like essentially is a symbol of overcoming like the ram and the sheep, that the ram becomes more docile, and so it turns into sheep. It's just a fascinating look at history and how religion and spiritual beliefs are woven into that.
Absolutely love that.
So here's from ancient Babylon, Mesopotamia, the hired laborer constellation called Hunga. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's at least 4,000 years old, but probably much older. It can also be called the plowman, the hired laborer, or the hireling. And it was meant to represent the people's earthen connection. In the ancient Mesopotamians' lunar zodiac, which was the lunar zodiacs came before the solar zodiacs, and this constellation was associated with the celestial hired laborer as the shepherd god Dumuzi, which is of course a god that was definitely mixed up with the stories of Inanna, which Kaylin knows, could probably spend another few hours talking about. Accepting this interpretation, the higher laborer as the shepherd god Dumuzi was the Greek zodiac. And then the ram can be read as the leader of the flock. And so we go back to that image of Jesus and the sheep, and you can see like a correspondence there, that they brought that image forward into later times. And it was after the center of learning that moved from Babylon to Egypt and Greece that things became more the ram than the plowman. So when associated with the shepherd god Dumuzi, the plowman connects humanity's ancestors in the region as less warlike and less focused on wars. More attention was focused on the land prior to the Greco-Roman times. So there was a much greater association and reverence for the earth, and the ram constellation was part of that, well over 2,000 years ago. And then it just evolved from there into more of a like associated much more with the sign of Aries and the warrior type of energy, archetypal energy there. And there was a really great article in Sky Telescope from 2018 that talks about the circle of animals and from the ancient origins of that circle, in particular the Mesopotamian origins. And anyway, it's just a fascinating look. Maybe I'll give a link to that, and when we send out information, people want to look that up themselves too. But you can see a picture of an ancient plow there below the pictograph that's present.
And this
You,
pictograph is interesting because these look like bulls.
yes,
The bull's
yes,
pulling the plow, so that puts those two constellations beside each other. Yeah,
Yes.
kind of like in that sense. And the other thing that's interesting is that because we only think of the priestess and the water bear as not being animals, but apparently at one time this constellation was a hireling, an indentured servant, or whatever we want to, whatever culture was looking at, they were seeing it as a human of some sort. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And so when we're looking at things and how things evolve over time, this could be the Ram constellation, could be something that evolves into something else, across the globe and maybe from different perspectives. So this is part of what Kaylin, you and Daniel to some degree talk about how, you know, we're co-creating new stories
Hmm.
with the stars right now. And so this is showing that evolution happening.
Yes, so much so.
So this is a little bit about the age of the Ram. This we're not going to go too deeply into this, but you can see I use a little bit of a different date, 1800 BCE, and these statues that Kayla and I have been actually discussing a bit about just before we came on live here. There's these ram-headed sphinxes that are dedicated to Amun-Ra or Amun-Re around 1500 to 1200 BCE. And it's this powerful row of ram-headed sphinxes that are lined up, that light up in the doorway at Karnak with the equinox, which I'll talk about in this. But there's other imagery. Go ahead. Yeah, you can slide. There we go. There's other imagery around the time of this quote age of the ram. If we're just only using, which was the March equinox, was something that in that part of the world really focused a lot of attention on. Now, this doesn't mean like they speak for the whole globe. This is something that was just much more powerfully radiated through the world. So we also have the story of the Golden Fleece, which I mentioned briefly, Jason and the Argonauts, the sacrificial ram, the origins of Judaism. Along with that comes from the god Baal, which was part of the Mediterranean god, creator god, Semitic, Canaanite, and Phoenician, as well as Carthage, and standing on the back of the bull. So basically, it was like an overcoming and coming into a new age where they were conquering the bull, so to speak, and coming into that space where it became, quote, the ram. Alexander the Great came in around the time of the end of the age of the ram, and he's sometimes pictured with the horns of the ram. So he was looked at as a god of sorts, like a pharaoh used to be in ancient times in Rome, and that's Zeus, Amon, which is he started to don horns when the March equinox became into the ram. So they started, the goddesses started to shift when New Ages came around in this particular time. So that's from 5th century BCE. So other things about the age of the ram, the emergence of professional armies was around this time. The violent takeover of the end of the matriarchal matrilineal cultures, of course, the origins of Judaism, the sacrificial lamb, and the birthing of the duality-based mentality, good versus evil. Like this was starting to come out around this time, and it really got cemented in when the age of the fish came with the two fish. And from earth-based uh, relationship to more patriarchal, materialistic, and intellectual-based relationship with nature. So it shifted our perception and how we did things as societies, as civilizations, especially in the European and Mesopotamian areas, and that even carried into, to some degree, into especially after Alexander the Great, into South Asia, India area, Pakistan area. Here's the evolution of the March equinox point. We can see right there about 1800 BCE, which is approximately the start. This is like one thing that we want to really emphasize is that it isn't just one specific year that an age of this extent starts or ends. Like you can celebrate New Year from the upcoming here 2022 to 2023, which happens at a particular moment at midnight, but how do you gauge midnight when you're talking about ages that last 2100 plus years? So you would probably do that over decades at least, if not much longer. So you can see the slide of the equinox point going through around its direction, and we're, off the screen here where it is right now. It's not quite, it's yeah, it's off the screen anyway. So maybe at a maybe I should have included that, but we can just show that like it's been a long time. That was 3,800 years ago. So we've come a long way since then. So here's the at Karnak. Here's the avenue of the ram-headed sphinxes. And Kaylin, you got a picture we'll show in just a moment here. But there's about 600 sphinxes and over 2,000 meters long facing west. And then the sunrise light illuminates the equinox from east to west. And these temples are really, really old, many thousands of years old. And Kaylin, you've been there, and you've got to experience the magnitude of this site here, which I'm a little envious of because I want to go and see it myself. But we can see history. It's like they were star worshipers. They were connected to the sun and the moon and the stars, and they lived that life. So in each culture did it in their own unique way. And so this is something like what caught my attention, and the knowledge that came through here on a personal level was how far we've come away from that as a civilization. And so seeing something like this is just like this really golden. So here's the sunrise at the equinox here, and going through the avenue of the ram-headed sphinxes. And it's really profound. I'd love to be there at that time at some point, and before I pass on to my next life. It'd be amazing to see that, like some of the other megalithic sites that help track the solar, lunar, and stellar patterns in the sky. Okay, the Golden Fleece. I know, Kaylin, you're going to talk about it also with the bull, because the bull is definitely involved in this. But it was a golden ram that was flown by a king, and eventually he sacrificed it and made a pelt out of it, and then hung it on a sacred tree. There's different versions of this, actually several different versions. But the golden fleece symbolizes a sort of authority and kingship, and it is definitely associated with the time of the equinox point moving into the age of the ram and the precession of the equinox. So the golden fleece was located in the sacred grove of, quote, Aries, the god Aries, and was guarded by the never sleeping dragon, which is Draco, or the scorpion constellation, because sometimes it's seen as a serpent or snake. Now, this is one of the things, is that the Milky Way galaxy goes through the circumpolar stars, like at the top of the sky, at the northern hemisphere, and the bottom of that is guarded by the scorpion. And a lot of cultures looked at that as kind of a serpent, scorpion type of energy that was like guarding the roots of the tree. And so, but you can also look at the actual Draco constellation in the north. So there's these images that were transposed, and this whole story is about the turning of the ages, and all the adventures that Jason has is connected into these constellations. So it's a creative way to teach about the shifting stars, constellations, and to navigate the night sky. Another version of this, which I was reading about this in I think it was Dan Siro's book, When the Dragon Wore the Crown. That's a really cool book when it talks about all the different ages in humanity with the constellations and the polar shift. So it shows where he was swallowed, and the goddess Athena comes in this depiction here, and intervenes and rescues Jason by coaxing the sea dragon to disgorge Jason, which is connected to the Cetus constellations, or the sea monster, the great whale. And Jason would have had to navigate the territory between the bull and the ram, and below it, in the celestial river Eridanus, connected to a Orion constellation, to get to the Golden Fleece, represented by the ram. So the taming of the bull, the sea monster, the harpies, the passage through the clashing rocks, with the divine dove assisting the Argonauts. So all of these little symbols connect us to various constellations. And I love how the feminine comes in to help the masculine. It's like they need assistance before they take the reins, so to speak. And Athena really was mixed in with a lot of different myths, and she really portrayed this like almost like this ideal image of a human being in certain circumstances. And I just love that, that he couldn't do it himself. And Athena could have left and just let him be eaten by the dragon or the sea monster, and then that would have been the end of it. But no, because the story needed to go on to where the masculine or the patriarchal forces needed to be the takeover. So this is another a different kind of experience of showing that takeover there.
It's interesting that they later forgot that the feminine was helping the masculine.
Yes,
Right? So I
yes.
love this. I love this, and it's interesting to see how whether it's the dragon or the snake or whatever is trying to eat them.
Yeah, and then she's holding this spear, and
Yeah,
that spear represents the equinox points and the dividing of the poles as well. And so she's helping to show people that, it's a teaching about the sky as much as it is as an entertaining story.
yeah.
There's something really profound about that, and Athena was in there. So um, yeah, thank you, Galen. Yeah, and so other references, some of this I covered a little bit here, like the Argo, the name of the ship, has its own constellation. I'm going to show you some pictures here in a moment, which is primarily in the southern hemisphere. Thousands of years ago, this constellation was more visible in the northern hemisphere, and the Argo traveled on the celestial seas, which are the constellation Eridanus, as well as the Milky Way, which represented portions of the journey. The Argonauts were also attacked by a race of six-armed giants, and Heracles, aka Hercules, which was also one of the Argonauts. So the Argonauts were also, it wasn't just a band of dudes, but it was all these different heroes of the time, of the great age of heroes, like the heroic age, and Castor, Pollux, Hercules, and all these folks were part of that. And they sailed to go, like, oh, who's like we have sometimes modern throwbacks where we have a kind of a band of guys that would go on an adventure, to go on a mission, and they all had special skills, and they were well known, and they would get together and find particular things or solve particular problems. And this is kind of like ancient version of that. So I like that six-armed giant likely has to do with the Orion constellation, potentially the twins, only because the twins, when we're looking at that, looks like it's got many arms. It could be just, instead of two people, it could be one that has all these different arms and legs, for example. Then there's these clashing rocks, which is the next challenge. And I've got a picture of this where just above the Argo constellation is the constellation Hydra, and just above that is the crow dove, and that's mixed up in like the flood myths. And so here we have this where they're trying to navigate these waters, and maybe we can think of the Hydra and or things as the clashing rocks. I don't know specifically. It requires more research to find that out, but that was what they had to do to navigate that, and the dove was important to show them the way. Jason also had to complete a task and plow the field with two bronze-hooved bulls, a reference to both the ram and the bull constellation, and then to find a way to put the sleepless dragon to sleep. And the only way he did that was with a goddess's help. There's different versions where it was, I think, Athena, and then there was another one with Medea. I think she helped as well.
Yeah.
And in order to get the golden fleece from the celestial world tree, which was the sacred oak tree. So all of these are all these powerful as above, so below, as within, so without stories of the stars, communicating, transmitting to us that we were shifting from one age to a new age. So here's a little bit, um, some labels I have of the bull and the ram and the plow right next to each other. There's the sea dragon, which is also called Cetus. And to the left of that is the celestial river Eridanus, which is another, it figures popularly in various myths in Greco-Roman history. And then at the other side is the celestial dragon, that's Draco, guarding the top of the world tree. So that's the top, and then the bottom of that would be considered the uh, where the scorpion is. It's not on this slide, but it's something we'll cover when we talk about the scorpion constellation towards the end of this series. And then there's in 1800 BCE, as seen from Greece, there's the Argo at the bottom, and then that's just below the dove crow, and then that line of like a snake hydra thing, creature there. So we see that. So because of the way the Earth is tilted and the wobble and so forth, different constellations would show up at different ages in depending on where you were on the planet, and so would create and help inspire different myths and stories. And so we see that there. And then on the right side, we see the celestial river Eridanus. Now, I think I was really considering this, but this is part of it requires more research. Is Sirius and the dogs, and maybe even the rabbit. I wonder where they come in, or if they were different like myths and what they represent. But we can see the Argo like right there in the Milky Way. Like you can see it going diagonally off the screen there, and then up to the solstice point, which is where the hand of the high man connects to the feet of the twins. So, the Argo is quote, pointed in that direction. And anyway, it's just fascinating. And, when you're looking at this and you're seeing the stories play out and read, you can, draw in a lot. But could be also ripe territory to open up to creating and inspired new myths and new stories.
I just want to say that the dove here, Columba, is
Oh, yeah.
the dove here as well, and we're going to see that also
Yes.
connected to the bull a little later on. But I don't have as good an image as you do, Eric, so just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was thinking about that, and I was like, okay, well, because that crow was also looked at as a dove too, and
Mhm.
so thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. So here's the star Hamal. I've got two stars that I've highlighted. Hamal, about 66 light years away at a +2 magnitude, relatively easily visible in the night sky outside the city, and it sits at 7 degrees 58 minutes Taurus, and it's their alpha star. So it's the brightest star in that constellation. It had several other names throughout the ancient world, and currently it symbolizes the horns of the ram or head of the sheep. And Bernadette Brady writes that it can be seen as a forceful star of action and independence, and it seems to provide an enhanced strength of will when in conjunction with a personal point planet or in the natal chart. Yeah, that's actually a star that's not far from my own home and roots, actually. And then Hamal is the leading star and is known as Iku and or just Ku, meaning the leading one. And the ram was one of the one who led the heavenly flock from Babylon, showing its connection to the Muzi, the shepherd god. It also was associated with Aloros, the first of 10 mythical kings of Akkad, and represented the 10 chief elliptical stars, including Alcyon, Aldebaran, Pollux, Regulus, Spica, and Teres, Algedi, Deneb Algedi, and then Shkat. again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that one right, but that's in the water bearer constellation, I believe. So you can see like this, all it's kind of wrapped up into the ancient myths here, and I think that's that image at the top. I think that's Inky uh, with his yeah, it has to do something with the gates. But I'll have to look at that, or it could be Dumuzi. I'll go back and look at that. I thought that had to do with Hamal and the ram, and you can see kind of a picture of the shepherd there with the sheep, which is a symbol of the age of the ram there. Temples in Hamal, and then there were, according to F.C. Penrose, it mentioned a book, Star Names. There are at least 8 temples from ancient Greece that were oriented towards this star, Hamal, in honor of Zeus and Athena. So Zeus was the primary god of the Grecian people, and during the age of the ram, was also seen with ram's horns, as we've seen before. And these temples were built around the time of the March equinox point, was in the ram, between 1580 and 360 BCE. Aligned with the equinox, and the star was called Ariadis by the ancient Grecians, which is connected, of course, to the sign of Aries as well as to the god Aries. There is obviously a connection, and F.C. Penrose's work is from 1893 and the orientation of Greek temples. So he did a lot of research around Greek temples and its alignments and what how they were factored in within his published in the periodical that was is known as Nature.
I'm struck by the fact that it was in honor of Zeus and Athena because, of course,
Yes.
Athena is born out of Zeus's head. And so,
Right, his idea.
yeah. And she's the expression of the feminine that is in support of the patriarchy, interestingly. Just some,
Yeah.
and she definitely supports the masculine uh, in being more dominating and controlling. So, like, thanks, Athena, but whatever. Anyway,
I think she might have been. I have to go back and look at what was she previously? What was she looked at previously?
yeah,
Like and as a prior incarnation before the Greco-Roman period.
yeah.
Um, so here's the star Sheraton. This is at 4 degrees 17 minutes Taurus, about 59 light years away, and it's the second brightest in the ram at plus 2.6. So the pluses are the less bright ones, and the minuses are the more brighter ones. And so Hamal was plus 2, and this is plus 2.6, so it's not quite as bright as Hamal. And Sheraton, in this, from the Arabs people at the time, they call it Sheraton, means a sign. So along with Mesarthim, the 2 stars mark the 27th nakshatra, the Ashwins and Horsemen, and you're going to get into that later, Kaylin.
Mhm.
And it was this part of the constellation was figured as a horse's head. And in ancient Persia, Sheraton and Mesarim were the protecting pair, and in ancient Mesopotamia, they were the head of the plow digging the earth. And so Michael Smokus and Fred Rebenfeld talk about this star in their Starlight Elixirs book. Quote, they can benefit in using this star when selecting a key or doorway lifetime for exploring past lives. From that lifetime, it may be easy to work with other past lives or lives that came after the doorway lifetime, because there are direct and powerful ties between the individual and that doorway lifetime. Working with such an energy, the star can be beneficial in allowing easier contact with the doorway lifetime. So it has to do with portal of the past and how we bring that in here into the future and you might even say our journey forward. So this is, they don't talk about Hamal. I didn't see any entry in there for Hamal, but they did talk about Sheraton there.
Beautiful.
And then here's when the planets are transiting the ram, the plowman. Just a few here. I know, Kaylin, you talked about when the sun is getting in there, and I've got maybe a little bit depending on when different dates. But Pluto was last there from 1852 to 1882. So it's going to be a long time before it goes in there. Neptune will go back into that constellation at least by 2039. Uranus is there until 2025. Chiron slips into that constellation in 2026, and Saturn in 2028, 2030. We've got Jupiter coming up really quickly next year, moves in there in 2023, 2024. And then Eris, this very, very slow moving Eris, in 2052, it'll move into that constellation and spend, looks like 7 decades in that sign, in that constellation there. So this again, you'll get access to when that happens there. Here's some personal stars. This is where like the sky images of the day later to show the ram's position the early morning before sunrise, where my IC is located. So you can see in the next slide here, I've got at the time that I was born, the stars Sheraton and Mesothelem were very, very close to my home and roots. So that's the bottom of the chart there. And if you've got some planets or personal points, in between roughly 2 to 20 degrees Taurus, you're going to have a personal star associated there in that constellation with one of your personal points there. And Uranus has been making its way, of course, through this area of the sky, and so you're getting that's part of what's being activated right now for all of us. Kaylin, do you have anything in that?
I So I think I have my descendant is at almost 15 Taurus, so it's kind of falls in there somewhere, but it's not as precise as I think yours is. So
Oh yeah, but that would be at the end of the ram. It would be the
yeah,
that last star, Bahari, I think,
yeah, somewhere
would
like
be
that.
part of the descendant there. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
cool.
yeah, cool. So we're just gonna look at the nakshatras and uh, a little bit different things. So, of course, we've been looking at them all along, but one of the things that is very fascinating to look at is how Kritika is aligned with the Pleiades and was, according to the Vedas, was aligned with the Pleiades, and that was the starting point for the nakshatras. Today, Kritika is listed as the third nakshatra located between 20 Taurus and 4 Gemini. So it covers the Pleiades. And a lot of scholars feel that the Pleiades, when it marked the zero Aries point or the vernal equinox, March equinox, that started around 2335 BCE or about 4,357 years ago. And again, not it doesn't have to be that precise, but that's the information that they kind of work with. And they feel that the Vedas, which are the sacred Hindu texts, were compiled at that time. So just something to know in terms of how this relates to the nakshatras, and probably the whole system was being dreamed into, thought of around that time. But it was around 6,500 years ago when the equinox point was at the galactic cross, at the galactic edge, and was entering the constellation of the bull. And we're going to look at that a little bit more. So now the first nakshatra, as Eric was speaking into, is Ashvini, an asterism that is part of the modern constellation of the Ram. So, I don't know that it seems like it should be the first one would be in the fish, but that's not how they're doing it. So I don't know why that is. But anyway, so this is just something for us to be aware of. And again, these are the constellations, the 12 zodiacal constellations, and on the outside are the 27 nakshatras and how they align with these constellations. So, Eric, I'll let you take the Ram to start.
Yes, thank you. So Ashwini, And one thing to point out, I mentioned the 27th one, but they different cultures and different parts of cultures switched and changed the what particular lunar mansion or nakshatra it was over long periods of time. So when you go back, you may be reading like different ones, but these are the current ones that are happening right now. So Ashwini between 2351 Aries and 0711 Taurus is represents the horse, star of transport, the power to heal self and others quickly, energy, movement, and speed. That makes a lot of sense. And the next one down, Bahraini, which is actually the last star there in the I think might be spelled just slightly different in the Ram constellation, the other end of the plow, um, is from 0711 Taurus to 2031 Taurus, Yani, which is a star of restraint, the power of renewal, purification, rebirthing, and transformation of spirit. Nakshatra of birth, death, and transformation, and also known as the buckle of Isis. Interesting, by ancient astrologers. Okay, so the last one, Kritika, which is something, Kaylin, you mentioned, which is associated with Pleiades. I don't know if you want to take this one here.
Well, yeah, I mean, it kind of covers both, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah,
They do overlap a lot. So, yeah, from 20 Taurus, 31 to 3 Gemini 50. Now, this is current. So, I'm going to give you access to something that I just came across, like this free PDF on that goes into more depth on the nakshatras, but they will give you they start with like 0 Aries with Ashwini, and then they give it so many degrees um, in this book that they have, and they don't tell you what the current degrees are in terms of the seasonal signs. So just so you know that, and but I think you will find it fun to look at if you want to look at this more in depth. So Kritika is the knife, and it looks like a knife here in the symbol. Star of fire, the power to cut through problems, burning through illusions to get to truth. So when if we look at the ram, these three nakshatras are covering parts of the ram. They also cover other parts of constellations. So the way they divided it up is not the way that we divide it up, just to keep that in mind. And then, of course, Kritika is the one that we just talked about that just starts the cover of the bull. And then Rohini is from 3 Gemini 52 to 17 Gemini 11. It includes Aldebaran, one of the 4 royal stars, and a Bohemian star of the ancient alchemists. So it's this is an interesting nakshatra if you have anything in these degrees of the seasonal signs, your planets within these degrees. It's considered the red one, the ox, the star of ascent, power to make things grow, enjoyment, creative expansion, and fertility. A lot to do with fertility and abundance. And of course, it's also near the Pleiades and definitely covers Aldebaran as well as the Hyads that we'll also be talking about a little bit more in a minute. And then Shirsa, like, okay, some of these are a little bit beyond me. From 17 Gemini to 0 Cancer, and that 0 Cancer point is where the June solstice sun rises currently on that on the galactic cross. So that's pretty interesting. And it covers the horns of the bull, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit more in a
right.
moment.
Wow. 0031 Cancer.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know. It's pretty powerful. And then, if you look at the symbol, this looks like the top of the Taurus symbol and then the Gemini symbol, right? So it's like it's combining the bull and the twins in a way. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's the deer's head, the star of searching, the power to find fulfillment, wandering, exploring, seeking truth gently. Anyway, so you can tune into this a little bit more when you do this. But so here is the bull constellation, Aldebaran. Here's the Pleiades, and here's the sun on the solstice on the top of the hand of the high man and at the tips of the horns of the bull. And we're going to look at that a little bit more closely as we go. So just to kind of give you an idea of when you can see is, at the time we're recording this in October, um, the Orion and the Bull are easy to see in the evening sky. Um, and I mean, yeah, what did I say that wrong?
Well, it's in the evening, late evening.
Late evening. Yeah, they're coming
Yeah.
up. They're rising now. Yes, thank you. And again, here's the June solstice point, and here's the tips of the horns of the bull. This is in March around 7 p.m. And this is so as we move more into the winter time, these constellations start coming up earlier and earlier, so we can start to see them. By early May, then the bull is setting in the evening sky, and then it disappears for a while and doesn't return back to the sky until late June or early July. And then this is looking at late June or early July in the early morning, like they're just starting to rise up over the horizon there. And and then the other thing that's really fascinating about this particular constellation of the bull and the twins, we'll talk about that, probably talk about this a little bit more, is that it's in a place in the sky referred to as the sacred hoop. And the Lakota star knowledge, and they see this as a circle. I didn't really draw a circle here, but it looks more like a shield. But these are the stars: the Pleiades, Capella, Castor, Pollux, in the twins, Procyon, Sirius, Rigel, are the stars that make up the sacred hoop. And then the path of the planets, the ecliptic, passes through this hoop of stars. And the path, or the center of the galaxy, the Milky Way path as a river of stars, also passes, and where they intersect is the galactic cross at the galactic edge, where the June solstice sun is rising. So, when we're talking about the bull, most of the bull is in this sacred group of stars. Anything you want to add about that, Eric?
Yeah. Well, uh, since most of the bull is in there, but one of the interesting things is that the star and Betelgeuse, even though it's off the ecliptic, it's actually really, really close. It will hit within this within the next few decades. It's going to hit the actual galactic edge. I mean, it'll hit zero Cancer. It's moving in that direction, and I would. This is this whole area of the sky is one of the best, like just like the when you look at the galactic center area with the Archer and the Scorpion, that area of the sky is really fantastic to see. This one is just is amazing with all these prominent stars there, and it's a great teaching tool because it's right, the ecliptic runs right through near the center of it there, and you get these prominent stars. And if any planets are in there, like Mars is 2022 here at the end of 2022 into 2023, you get a really good sense of how to navigate that whole area of the sky. So just absolutely perfect. So the Mars is right now between the horns of the bull, and it's going to stay in that area for quite a long time, or roughly in the that area. It goes just outside the horns of the bull by the end of December and first half of January, but then it goes back into the horns late in January 2023. So, but once other planets get into that space, again, this is talk about spurring all kinds of myths, which you're gonna, talk about here in just a few moments. And yeah, definitely look at the Lakota myths around this because they hold this incredible celebration and sun dance, and they walk the land. They do it in different places throughout the time when the sun is in this part of the sky, and it takes place over months actually. And so it was they literalized the sun's journey through this sacred hoop right there in the Black Hills area of North America.
Yeah, and also when you're looking out at this part of the sky, when you're seeing Aldebaran, the Pleiades, and the twins, and the bull, and all of that, you're looking out beyond our galaxy, so because
Yeah,
the edge of the galaxy. So that's kind of cool to think about. So as we've mentioned before, that we don't necessarily know how far back some of these stories go, and there's a lot of evidence that perhaps they go back further than what people have said, but at least 7,000 years, probably more like 17,000, and probably more like 40,000. And one of the things that we're going to do is put a link to a movie. It's called The Cave of Forgotten Dreams, and it's on YouTube. You can watch it for free there. And it talks about the cave paintings that represented the bull, and going back, way back into culture, for probably further back than we even realize. And this has been something that has been seen by Druids and Babylonians and Egyptians and Greeks, and many, many other cultures saw this constellation as a bull or a horned cow. And we what we're seeing here is this is Orion next to the bull. The bull looks like it's charging Orion. Orion has his shield up and his club ready to knock the bull out, I guess. Anyway, so and then the Greeks also saw Hercules or Heracles or however they talked about it as one of the things he did was he conquered the Cretan bull, and this kind of looks a little bit like this, like Orion, fending off the bull or trying to take out the bull or whatever it is that he was doing here. So anyway, it's like a similar thing, and except he's reaching for the horn of the bull and maybe his nose. I don't know why he's doing that, but
And there's a club there on the
yeah,
ground.
I know. Isn't that wild? It's like he dropped the club to grab the bull for something. For
Yeah.
some reason. Anyway, but this is ancient Greek mythographer um, Acucilius, who he this is like a mosaic that he created way long time ago. So just interesting to see how these have been around for such a long time. Now in Egypt, they've had a lot to do with the cow or the bull. You can see this is Hathor. She has the cow. She's got kind of like a cow's head and ears. In many of their pictographs, they have these images with the bull's horns, as you can see that kind of at the top of Hathor here. And so they were doing a lot of worship of the bull god that they also saw. This was maybe prior to what a lot of people think of Osiris nowadays. And then it went to other countries, and it became this imagery became associated with both Osiris and Isis. And in many of the Egyptian listings of the zodiac stars, the bull was the first one. So probably happened at the time when the spring equinox was in the sign in the constellation of the bull. And so let's see. What else do I want to say here? Um, I guess those are the main things that we want to look at it this particular one. So then there's the vernal equinox was marked about 4,000 to 1,700 BCE. So if we look at the fact that we're in the year 2022 right now, as the time we're doing this recording, that's like over 6,000 years ago when the bull was in, or when the vernal equinox was in the bull. We think probably is more like 6,500 years ago, but these numbers are a little, they can be a little bit loose in that. And so both Virgil and Ovid were describing what they felt the meaning of this was, but their interpretations of it weren't so easy to understand. So here we have, we'll see this in the story later. We've got Europa riding on the great white bull, a couple of different versions of that happening. And they oftentimes depicted the bull as carrying Europa away, and then as crouching, or as pulling, or as lame, or as pulling a plow, as we saw in the image that earlier that Eric was showing, where the two bulls were pulling the plow. So they think that's why the top half of the bull is usually what's depicted and not the whole entire bull. So the Greeks were also, in terms of the story of Jason and the Argonauts, they had the two bulls with brazen feet that Jason was able to tame, and then and or to conquer in some way. Um, so the astronomer David Thompson talked about this, and back in the 1850s, and he said the Cretan bull and a transit through the sign or constellation, I think is more accurately said, may have been the celestial Bosphorus, meaning Cattle Strait, uniting the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara, while also separating parts of Asia, Turkey, or Anatolia from European Turkey of the Argonautic voyage, meaning Jason and the Argonauts, the voyage. And so you see here Jason at the World Tree grabbing the golden fleece with the help of Athena or Metis or whoever it was that was helping him. And you see the serpent wrapped around the World Tree. And so again, this is like how they were depicting the shift from the age of the bull to the age of the ram. Um,
Wow.
so cool. I'm like,
Yeah, that is pretty. I like that. Yeah.
yeah. Now, this is more of a Babylonian depiction, and there's stories about how Ishtar was. She made advances to Gilgamesh, and he rejected her, and she got pissed, and she went to her father and her mother and said, "I need the bull of heaven to like to release onto the people." And they're like, maybe not, because this guy kind of creates 7 years of famine." And she says, "Well, I have enough grain stored up for the people." And all the animals for the next 7 years. And so they finally agree, and she releases the bull of heaven. And if it's not released, she's going to uh, release the dead from the underworld and have them start killing people or something. So anyway, it's like this very destructive tale. And the bull's breath, what first breath causes 100 men to fall into a hole, and then the second breath causes 200 more men to fall into the hole. It's like, oh my gosh. So Gilgamesh and Enkidu, his cohort, one of his cohorts, they decide they're going to slay the bull together. And they manage to do that. Enkidu goes behind the bull and pulls its tail, and Gilgamesh thrusts his sword into the bull's neck. And then they offer the bull's heart to the sun god Shamash. And of course, Ishtar's not happy about that. So she stands on the walls of Uruk and curses Gilgamesh. And then she orders all the courtesans and prostitutes and harlots to mourn the death of the bull of heaven, which we could imagine is the death of the age. And then meanwhile, Gilgamesh is holding a celebration over his defeat of the bull. And so could be seen as the leaving of the matrilineal process going to the patrilineal process, which is the death of, as the age of the bull is ending, and we move into the age of the ram. It becomes a more patriarchal kind of world that we live in. So, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean that's you covered it. That's that whole story is like the really symbolic of that whole era coming into a whole new type of civilization that's run by the masculine or the patrilineal and patriarchal forces, and when it got to the ram, it really took off in a much stronger fashion after that, and so it was like, and Gilgamesh is like one of those other major heroes or kings that showed up around that time that really started the avalanche, so to speak.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, you're right on there.
So interestingly, the Sumerians also had a tale of Gilgamesh and the Bull of Heaven, and how it's slain, very similar to the one of Ishtar, but in this story, it's Inanna, not Ishtar. And of course, Inanna and Ishtar represent the planet Venus. And their story of, different stories of how they go through their initiation and move through the sky and all of that is very much connected to the Venus cycle. But her dispute was not clearly stated in anything that I could find. But she does coerce her parents, or especially her father, to give her the Bull of Heaven. And instead of threatening to raise the dead to eat the living as Ishtar does, she just merely threatens to let out a cry that will reach the earth. And I guess that's terrifying for some reason. I don't really understand that part exactly why that is, but But again, we have here's Orion with the club or the sword and the shield raised as the bull is headed towards him. So it feels like that is definitely connected. You know, that they were that's what they were seeing in the sky, and that's the story they decided to tell about what that meant, especially at the time of the moving from the age of the bull into the age of the ram.
But there's also uh what you call it, that after that, that's where she goes to the underworld to
Yeah.
mourn
The
the
death of
death of the great bull of heaven. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely connected to that. And it's interesting that
The,
it's like that in one story they're saying that she's helping to get the bull killed. Oh, no, she didn't want the bull to be killed, but she kind of
no,
like unleashes the bull and then the bull gets killed and then she has to go to the underworld to mourn the loss of the bull.
I think she wanted to stop the rise of the
The
patriarchy.
patriarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably you're right. Yeah.
Because Gilgamesh was wanting to become immortal and wanted his friend to become immortal. So he didn't like, he was like the symbol of like where the kings used to be after 1 year or whatever, they would be sacrificed for the good of the earth.
Yes, that's right.
And he was the one that wanted to kind of continue on his reign for decades or centuries.
Yeah.
Meaning like he was, because he was part immortal. So um, and then anyway, there's more. Obviously, we can talk a lot more about it. Yeah, it was just another part of that where it's like, okay, now it was the changing of the age. Like this is the time that the matriarchy and matrilineal forces are going on decline. And I know that in the book Unplugging the Patriarchy, there was talk about an agreement that was made that was supposed to shepherd in this kind of experience for quote the men and women in this way. Um, uh, I can't remember the author's name.
Lucia
Lucia? Was it
Renee. Lucia
Renee?
Renee.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's a great book, highly recommended.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, now I'm just appreciating what you're saying, Eric, because I think that uh, the bull is often depicted as masculine, but there are cows with horns that could have been also what was really going on, but somehow the name of the bull really got associated with that. So it might have been the death of the great mother cow that was, you know, I don't know, something like that. So it's just a thought. Um, in the story of, in this Greek story of Europa, she is the Phoenician princess and daughter of King Agenor. And the story is that Zeus abducts her because he turns himself into this magnificent white bull, and then she becomes enamored with him and hops on his back, and then he swims out into the sea and takes her to Crete. And then he appears as himself and he seduces her. She winds up having three sons with him, including Minos, who becomes the king of Crete and introduces the bull cult to the island. And the other thing to know is Europa is one of the four largest moons of the planet Jupiter, also known as Zeus. So that they decided to name these moons on Jupiter after the women that he would have seduced, I suppose, I guess, and had children with. Um, so um, then another tale about Io, who at first she rejects his Zeus's advances, and she because she's one of Hera's priestesses, and she knows she could get in trouble. I think is why she does that. But the but Zeus turns her into a heifer to protect her because he doesn't want to give up on like trying to seduce her. I guess that's what the whole point is. But anyway, and then she bears him two sons, or a son and a daughter, Ephesus and Curiosa, and they before she marries the king of Egypt. So she doesn't wind up marrying, or she can't be with Zeus because he's married to Hera anyway. But they don't say why she's turned into a heifer rather than a bull. So this is again why that question is: was it a heifer or was it a bull or was it both, or who's telling the story about this? So, um, and then when we look at the Bible, we see that Adam offered the bull as a sacrifice, and that there in the Mithraic bull is found in temples 4 or 5 centuries before Christ, suggests the bull was prominent in Babylon and Persian astronomy. And you can see that this is very Sumerian kind of Persian looking image of the bull. And then here's this is similar to, I think, one that you had shared, Eric, but you see the horns of the bull, and they're making an offering to the bull on each side of this. And so, and then this is more Egyptian honoring of the bull. So in Acadia, the bull was referred to as the bull of light, and the heavenly bull is also mentioned in connection with the rain. That references the Haids when they rise and would represent the time of the rainy season. And I love this, that the Druid festivals honored the bull occurring when the sun was with the bull. And that it was kind of like also around the Scottish New Year when the Candlemas bull was rising in twilight, crossing the sky for the rest of the night. So they would do these certain kinds of ceremonies and honoring of this constellation. Now, the other piece is, and I read this book when I was in college called The King Must Die, and there's a follow up book called The Bull from the Sea. And it was all about the bull dancing or bull leaping that they were doing in Crete. And it was the elite uh, proving that they had power over the bull, I guess, because they could like leap over it and uh, take the bull by the horns and do these dances around the bull and that kind of thing. In some stories, and some other stories, they just had slave people, and it was kind of how they made a sacrifice to the bulls. But anyway, but it was quite the expression. Like people came to watch this because it was so amazing. Well, the Minotaur in Crete, having the head of a bull and the tail of a head and tail of a bull, and then the body of a man, and they had to do sacrifices to this Minotaur, and it was trapped in a labyrinth. And so if you went into the labyrinth, you could not get out. And this is kind of also the story of Arachne helping Theseus with giving him a string so he can go in through this labyrinth and go to and he kills the Minotaur and frees the people from this horrible creature. And of course, there's a whole story about how the creature even comes about because Minos's wife falls in love with a bull, and I don't know. Anyway, it's quite the story. Well, you'll see here. This is a fresco from Gnosis where they're leaping over the bull, and this one's got their hands on the horns of the bull, and it's going to probably leap up over the bull and that kind of thing. So this was something that was practiced for a long time, but it eventually ended as we moved into the age of the ram. So if you want a fun story, I highly recommend reading The King Must Die and The Bull from the Sea. Then the Chinese looked at 4 different areas of the sky. So they had that azure dragon in the east, they had the vermilion bird in the south, they had the white tiger in the west, and the black tortoise in the north. And the white tiger overlays the constellation of the bull. And so when there were 2 great periods of star naming in ancient China, and the first one was around 2300 BCE, and the second one was during the Chao dynasty from 1120 to 220 BCE. And so they feel like this was when they were seeing this as the white tiger, but also connected to the bull. So the Chinese observers saw the scorpion was a dragon, the water bear was a serpent, the tortoise or a tortoise, and the bull was a tiger, and the lion was a bird. So that those main 4 constellations, the big 4 constellations, that we often see when the solstices and equinoxes are with these constellations. We know we're at a turning of an age, or major, bigger than just a month, like uh, going shifting from the age of the bull to the age of the ram, or to the age of the fish. It's bigger than that. It's like a whole seasonal shift. Um, so the white tiger is covering the constellations of the ram, the bull, and the twins. So I thought that was really fun to see how that culture is looking at it. Now, uh, these are coins that feature the bull or the Pleiades, and this is the attack bull. This bull is like charging. Also, this bull has the face of a man. Um, Pretty interesting that this back in 43 BCE, also back as far as 312 BCE, that they were creating these coins to represent the constellation of the bull or the Pleiades. Let's see. So I'm going to talk about four main stars: the Pleiades, Aldebaran, and the horns of the bull, Alnath, and Alheka. And this is from this slide. Those of you who've taken the Bohemian Star class will recognize this. One of the ways that we talked about each of the Bohemian stars, and to just give a sense of what planets were connected to them, what herb was connected to that star, what stone was connected to that star, what color, and what incense was connected to that star. And then we also did an invocation to each of the of the Bohemian stars. So I'm just going to share this with you really quickly. It's kind of fun. Seven sisters of the sky, I invite you, one and all, to imbue, infuse, and enhance my talisman, amulet, elixir, altar, sacred object with your great love, peace, and wisdom. Thank you, and for enhancing my telepathic skills and ability to connect with the plants, animals, and beings from beyond this earth. Thank you for guiding me and growing my ability to know and perceive spiritual truths and universal principles that assist me in living my divine purpose in ways that are beneficial to all life. It is done, it is so, and I give thanks. Blessed be. So you're welcome to use this if you want. And if you're making a talisman or an amulet or an elixir, or you're putting an altar that's going to honor the Pleiades, or you're making some kind of sacred object, you can just, you just ask to infuse that object with this intention, and with the intention of the Pleiades. So pretty cool. And this is an asterism that has, well, they're considered the seven sisters, but mostly people can really see six of the stars. But interesting, there was somebody who was able to see 11 of them, was able to map 11 of them, and we'll see that in a moment. And almost all cultures, Native American, Greece, Rome, Siberia, Australia, saw these as seven sisters. And then Hawaiians saw them as Makali'i, meaning little, and the Mayans saw the Pleiades as Za'ab, meaning the rattle of the snake. And there are descriptions of these stars going back more than 40,000 years. Pretty cool. So probably further back than we can even imagine. And that the Pleiades have been described as the cosmic star mother who gave her children the codes of light. And so also the flock of doves, interesting that the whole story of Jason and the Argonauts connects to the doves as well. And this is thought that to have links to Mary Magdalene and the Merovingian bloodline as well. So just some other fun things to connect with. This is what Starlight Elixirs has to say about it, about Alcyone, Electra, and Meropa, or the Pleiades. I'm going to let people look at that themselves because we're running out of time here, but just something you can tune into, as well as that there are some people that say that there's a universal story that about the lost seventh Pleiade that goes back 100,000 years. So that's even further back than the 40,000 years that they were talking about. And so that this one goes through just different variable like how bright it is or not, and that kind of thing. And here we go. This it was Johann Kepler who mapped out 11 Pleiades stars. So this constellation or this asterism is pretty remarkable. Something else that's really remarkable about it is that every 8 years, Venus passes right through the like well, it can be seen sitting inside the Pleiades. And I think I have something that will show when that is. Again, so um, this is a little story that we shared in the the Bohemian Star class about the Pleiades. And interesting, in just a few days, October 16th, 2022, Maya, one of the stars of the Pleiades, is going to enter zero Gemini. And then by 2040, and I wonder if this is what I was thinking, Eric, when I told you 2040 before,
Oh
um,
yeah.
the last star of the Pleiades will enter zero Gemini, and by then we'll have all the stars of the Pleiades in Gemini that we look at. So yeah, by November of 2041, yeah, the last one, Electra, goes in on November of 2041.
And so they'll all be in there then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of cool.
Yeah.
I wonder if I'll still be here. Anyway, this is just giving you the magnitude and the distance from Earth. Then these are the planets that are going to be with the Pleiades over time. So in 2025, uh, July 15th, um, Uranus will be with exactly with the Pleiades 3 times. And then Chiron is going to be there in 2033, Jupiter in 2024, and the nodes different times that they will be with the Pleiades. Now here's the next time that the Venus will pass through the Pleiades is in April of 2028. The closest time will be in April of 2036. And then the next series of moon occultations will be from 2033 to 2037.
That's 0.07 degrees. That's almost an occultation.
I know. It's so close.
That's, I mean, wow.
The last time I saw them, I saw the Pleiades and I mean the Venus inside the Pleiades in 2020. It's like it looked like it was right in it, right there. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see if you get a chance. So mark your calendar for
Hmm.
for 2028, just so you know that'll be the next one. Um, and then Neptune will get up to the Pleiades in 2052, and Pluto not until 2128. So we got a ways to go. These are just the conjunctions with the Pleiades over the next few years, and of course some of that will be. Oh, no, never mind. And then now we're going to just look at the Hyades. So this V shape here that is the closest asterism to the Earth. The only one closer is Ursa Major. So the Hyades are like 150 light years from Earth, and Ursa Major is like 80 light years from Earth. And of course, Aldebaran marks the eye of, and this is the face of the bull, and then this is the eye, and it's the easiest. You can see that asterism pretty easily in the night sky. Also considered sisters. um, as well. And let's see. Oh, yeah, because Aldebaran is the eye of the bull, it tends to represent why, how we are perceiving this reality. And then again, this is how when the Pleiades, the Hyades were rising, they would consider that to be the rainy season, and that the sisters were always crying for their brother Hyas, who was killed by a lion. Sometimes the story is a boar, and was later transformed into the water bearer constellation. And so that they associated this constellation with the rainy season. I don't know that it's still that rising at that time because the seasons have shifted so much, but just something to be aware of. And that the Hyades are half sisters to the Pleiades, and Atlas was the father to both. So they were putting the Hyades and the Pleiades beyond the reach of Orion. Because he was lusting after them. So this is Aldebaran, the information about Aldebaran, and just the invocation is, "O mighty wise guardian star of insight and perception, thank you for blessing my talisman or elixir or whatever with your expansive, powerful knowing and equal powerful not knowing. So I, in turn, bless this world with genuine wisdom that uplifts me in all life. So, of course, we can see the belt of Orion points to the Hyades, and you can see Aldebaran, and that points to the Pleiades. And so, and then this is the winter triangle. So, this is, as we mentioned earlier, a really fascinating area of the sky to really tune into. Um, so I'm not going to go into the details of Aldebaran as much. I'm going to just skip ahead, and here's where the planets will be with Aldebaran. You can have all this information. Um, and how the June solstice sun, you can see the is kind of like just on the edge of the horns of the bull at the on the galactic cross at the galactic edge. And so we're going to talk a lot about the horns of the bull here. This is something that was considered. These were considered these when planets were between the horns of the bull. And Eric was mentioning how Mars is there right now at the time we're recording this, and that every year Venus comes by there, Mercury comes by there, the Sun, of course, is by there once a month. The Moon comes between the horns of the bull, and this is something that the um, ancient Egyptians were seen as being um, how you entered the Elysian fields by passing through the horns of the bull. And so, and the Elysian fields were seen as a multi layered paradise or heaven. Now, El Nath is at 22 Gemini 53, and El Heka is at 25 Gemini 06. So here we can see in this star map how they're doing. So this is El Nath and this is El Heka, based on how the constellation shows it. And so the crescent new moon between the horns of the bull, when it was showing up near a seasonal shift, let ancient cultures know it was the shifting of an age. So, like if say we have the equinox, I mean the solstice happening here now, and then we get the new moon, crescent moon between the horns of the bull, we know we're at the shifting of an age. Um, they didn't always identify which one it was, but anyway, so the pyramid texts read that the bull of the sky inclines his horn so that the deceased may pass. So that's an exit point or a way out. And it creates an image of traveling down the celestial highway, or some refer to it the river of stars. It also calls to mind the yellow brick road, only it's a road of stars that defines our soul's journey in this reality. So the Elysian Fields was a place of blessedness and peace where everyone was delightful, with soft green meadows, lovely groves, a delicious life-giving air, and sunlight that glowed softly purple. I love that imagery. So here's the moon between the horns of the bull. Kind of cool. That's like a full moon between the horns of the bull. Um, and so Starlight Elixirs has a lot of things to say about this. I'll let you take look at that. But here is the thought, like to pass through the horns of the bull is a test of courage. It's a test of strength. And so when you are able to pass that initiation, then you can gain the blissful experience of the Elysian fields. And this is what the Egyptians were seeing in terms of relating to the horns of the bull.
I'm a
So
little concerned about that bicyclist running up against the bull
I
there in
know.
the picture. Doesn't look too promising for him, for them.
I know. It's like, are you crazy? Exactly. I know. But anyway, hey, maybe they want to pass that test.
They want to pass the test.
Yeah. So this is just some of the planetary energies when they'll be with the horns of the bull. Jupiter in 2025, Saturn in 2030. Saturn and Uranus will be there in 2030. And then, of course, every month the moon comes by. Every year the Venus and Mars come by. So those are the dates you can tune into that and work with that. And then for me, I have my south node at 12 Gemini 37. And Aldebaran is at 10, currently at 10. I think it was at 950 or something when I was born. So I have the south node very close to Aldebaran. And I went ahead and I was like, for fun, just looked it up, and Gemini south node will conjunct my south node on August 26, 2030. So that's coming up. And then the north node will enter Gemini in 2039. So the south node will enter Gemini in 2029 and then enter the north node will enter in 2039. It's about 9.5 years or so between when they make the opposite point. So then the north node will conjunct my south node on January 2nd, 2040. So these are some things you can do. And it's like, oh, that means that that's happening really close to Aldebaran, the eye of the bull. Um, and I feel like that's one of the reasons I love that star so much, is because my nodes are there. My south node is there.
That's also when Saturn and Uranus are going to be there too.
Yes, I know.
So you're getting a triple whammy there.
Right, it'll be pretty interesting. So some of the you can work with sage with the bull constellation, and these are the stones you can work with this constellation as well. Um, and I think we we should have a little bit of time for Q&A, but yeah, that's what we got. Phew.
I'm glad I got back. My internet went out for
Oh.
like 10 minutes or so, and so I was thinking of be going onto my phone and trying to get on that way, but it came back on. So
Oh, and I'm glad you didn't like knock the rest of us out when you
I
left.
know I was worried. I was like very concerned,
Maybe
and
because I'm co-host, it didn't it
yes.
kept us going. So
So yeah. So I was like, wow, you're still talking. Oh, good. It's still recording. Everything's fine. Okay,
I
good.
didn't
We're
even
fine.
see that you were gone, Eric. So this is good.
Oh.
All right. So any questions, any insights, ahas, anything people want to ask us about or share with us? I see, Rebecca, your head is spinning. Star Marathon. Yeah, I know. I knew this was going to be a big one because there was just so much information to tune into. So,
And everybody has the slide. We'll have the slides
yes.
to gaze, to look at, to study, and you're welcome to share. And if you have questions, Kayla and I are available to do our best to answer what you ask. And there's definitely more classes ahead for us. And you can see the magnitude of how much the ancient peoples and looked at these stars, these constellations, and how much they were utilize them to navigate their lives and their cultures, the seas and so forth, and everything else. Our stories are up there.
And we just scratched the surface. I mean, literally, there is a whole lot more. We just try to give you the main essence of what we were finding. So yeah, pretty cool. Anybody have anything you want to share, say? Because if not, we may be complete.
I think Julia raised her hand, or
Oh,
Yeah, I did.
yes, cool.
So I feel so like blown away. It's like enough information to entice me to want to know more. And I'm guessing that, so you say you're going to have other classes. Is there something that kind of leads us to here, or is it just a matter of just really steeping in this information and it eventually starts to connect?
Yes. Well, Eric and I did do a class on the Bohemian stars, just looking at the 15 magical stars of the ancient alchemists and how to work with them from that magical perspective and where they're located. And we didn't go into the constellational information so much on that. So that might be helpful. Uh, the thing for me is I've been aware of the constellations, and Eric probably he can tell you how long he is, for 32 years at least, where I first started getting introduced to them. I'm still learning. I think it's just you'll get things, you'll understand things. It's like I know I have a connection to Aldebaran. I know I have a connection to certain stars based on where my planets are and so on. That tend to be some of my favorite ones, but because I have a personal alignment with that. But I think it's just going out and being under the sky and working with them, and also hearing the stories and hearing and going back and rewatching the videos a few times will help a lot. It's some you can't get it the first time. I didn't get it the first time. I'm sure Eric will confirm that he didn't either. I had to hear
Nope.
it for many years, and then finally it was starting to sink in. And the whole thing about the difference between the seasons and the constellations, that took me quite a while to finally really get at a deep, deep level. Like, oh, okay, so we're talking about seasons moving through constellations. And then I would go out and look and say, "Oh, there's where my moon was, but it's in Sagittarius and it was in the Scorpion. How is that possible?"
I
You know,
think that's part of it too, is that I'm just trying to split in the two and understand them both because they're both lifetimes of study. So thank you both so much.
yeah, thank you. Eric, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, the when it comes to the signs and constellations, I mean, there's Kaylin, I know you've done a couple of videos about that. I've got something, but there's also a nice book that was done originally as a thesis uh, by researcher Robert Powell about the history of the zodiac that really dives into the deeper waters of where it came from and who brought forth what and what culture did what. It's That's the title of the book, History of the Zodiac by Robert Powell, and you can find that online. But it also requires a lot of like going out into the sky and having experiences with the sky, having experience with the sun and the moon and the stars to just, you know, have it be part of your life. Um, I was in Arizona a couple of weeks ago doing the Night Sky and Cosmology event for the Journey of the Ages Mystery School, used to be known as Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. And the last night that I was there, I got to see Mars in the horns of the bull rise at the same time as one of the tips of the horns, El Nath. And that would in astronomy they call that, and astrology as well, they call that in rising in Paran. And they used to use that as part of their star knowledge when they had different, like they would be on the different parts of the horizon but rising at the same time. And so that was another relationship there. And you have an experience, like I had a clear horizon when I was there, and I got to see that show up like that just after Aldebaran rose. And so you get to see that and connect, and there's other transmissions that can come through when that happens, especially when a planet is coming through that area, or the moon, and so forth. So it's being out there under the sky and, you know, having a living relationship with it.
I love what you're saying, Eric, because that's so important. What we can do is share with you what has been known about these constellations. What's the history? What's behind it? How can, but getting your own direct relationship and transmissions with these parts of the sky. I mean, it's what ancient cultures did. They didn't watch TV. They spent time out underneath the sky,
Yeah.
and it helped inform them. And they as like all the temples that were built to track the rising of Hamal, or where Hamal would be at certain times, or that's been done with other stars as well. The Pleiades were very important, and lots of temples have been built to track that. Regulus as well. So there are certain stars that they were very tuned into and were paying attention to, and were probably getting information from, because they had that direct relationship and were paying attention to when they were rising, when they were available to see at certain times of the year, that kind of thing. When planets were with those stars, then there was additional transmissions that were coming through. And so it's a lifetime practice. I, I feel like I've been doing this a long time, and I'm still just always blown away and amazed at what I get to see in the sky and when planets are with certain stars. And I love, Eric, that you got to see Mars rising with Elnath. That is just awesome
Yeah,
because
I'd never seen that before. It
yeah,
really was, just blew my mind.
I've seen
Yeah.
those happen sometimes, not that one, but seen other ones that happen like that, and it is so mind blowing. It is just like a wow experience, definitely worth having.
I have seen it with, I think I saw it with Arcturus as well, with Mars years ago, when Mars was at close to opposition around that point. But you can see that sometimes that happens with planets and the moon, and you can develop relationships with it where you are, and with the land. So yeah, I fully recommend, suggest, wherever you can, however much that you are able to try to form a relationship there, wherever you are.
I also just want to say, Julia, because you are not alone in terms of like, how do I make sense of all this? How do I put it all together? There's so much information. And because we have lived in a left brain consensus reality for so long, we've been trained to get the information in a certain way. And so it's good to have left brain information, but it's more important to also be able to integrate it in a more experiential kind of way. And then the left brain information will make more sense as you start to embody more of that experience as well. And then you'll get your own insights and maybe you'll start teaching your own class. So, yeah. Thank you for that question. I think it's a great question. All right. So, I think maybe we're complete and want to thank everybody for being here. And we look forward to seeing you in like a week and a half. We'll be back.
The 16th.
Yeah. So, so bye everybody.